Hello again, everyone. I'm Tim here, and today, for one of my recipes this week, I'm going to be making a Keto Zuppa Toscana. That's that creamy Italian sausagey soup that you would typically get at like Olive Garden. It typically is fairly keto friendly, minus the potatoes in it, and today's substitute will have cauliflower, rice cauliflower instead. So anyways, let me show you the ingredient list over here. So, I have Parmesan cheese and heavy cream and beef base to make a beef stock. That will be the liquid components. I have a little bit of cream cheese over here to help thicken it up in the absence of a roux to avoid using flour. For the produce, I have bacon. I have Italian sausage right beneath that. I have kale, which I need to stem and clean. Minced garlic today because that was on sale. Some salt and pepper, red pepper flake. I may or may not need that red cooking wine back there to deglaze my pan. And then a little bit of leftover thyme and rosemary for herbs as well. And I can't remember if I mentioned it, but 1 onion. This is a fairly simple recipe. So as per usual, I'm going to get started on vegetable prep. So since I'm already using minced garlic, there's nothing I need to do with that. Let me rotate you again so you can see. I'm just going to do 1 onion. I have 1 onion. I have a pound package of thick cut bacon. I have a 1 pound package of the Italian sausage. Pre-seasoned, mild, I believe. So the main seasonings in mild Italian sausage will be found typically. And then from the minced garlic container, I'm just going to need about the equivalent of 3 cloves of garlic, so 3 tablespoons. Yeah, 1/2-inch dice. Gonna set that aside. As per usual, I'm doing all of my vegetable prep before I do any of my meat prep. The only meat prep here for today's recipe is just dicing some bacon up for the soup. The bacon will be the first thing I cook off. I'm basically just rendering that to get it nice and crisp and using that bacon fat to build the flavor in my pot the rest of the way. Right now I'm just taking 2 thyme sprigs and some loose leaves of rosemary I had. See, I'm gonna give that a quick little chop. I don't need too much herbs today. This is only about maybe a tablespoon, but that will be plenty considering that the sausage I have is already pre-seasoned. I'm going to have bacon, thick cut applewood smoked, and red pepper flake and salt. And then the kale has its own flavors as well. So set that aside. I also have some other cooking projects going on just for personal stuff that you've seen before. Like last time I showed you the asparagus and cherry tomatoes, so I don't need to bother showing you guys that again. And then I have some bacon going as well for the week, just to snack on. Right, I'm gonna pause for 1 second. I'm back. Next I'm cleaning some kale. This guy's a little limp, but that's okay because he's going into a soup. I've bought this I bought this yesterday. Oh, it was just that one leaf that was limp. Yeah, kale, like cilantro, and some of the other, well, it's not an herb, but a lot of vegetables are grown in a somewhat sandy soil. So I'm putting this all in the colander so I can give it a good rinse before it goes in my soup, because otherwise I'm going to have gritty soup, and not from anything I've actually made, just from saying. I can even feel a little bit of the grit on my fingers right now. Because I will admit, there are some times I do not rinse some of my vegetables, but for you guys, for practice, and for the consumption of others, it's important to be courteous and do as many proper procedures as possible. For example, usually at home, I'm cooking naked because I'm comfortable. But I will not do that to you guys here today. And you'll be surprised that I had that one big bunch of kale, but after I removed all these stems, by the way, they're edible, but they have a very long cook time. I would treat these as less hardy than collard green stems. So if I wanted to get it to where all the kale is tender, this kale alone would need to cook for about an hour or so. That would speed up in a pressure cooker, but that's just because that's playing with atmospheric pressure. Increasing pressure helps reduce your cook time for most substances. All right, and then I'm just gonna let that drain before I put it into my soup. It's going in towards the very end when I had the cream component going, all the proteins in there, and it's going in way later. And now I'm gonna go ahead and dice up this bacon. A pro tip, this bacon isn't completely frozen, but if you want an easy way to dice up bacon, have it freeze it and let it get partially thawed out. It sticks together sufficiently, and it's just easier to dice it or slice it. It doesn't want to spread out away from you. This is 1 pound. I'm just doing maybe a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch dice across all the strips. And this is going to get rendered in my pot momentarily. Alright. I can't touch my iPad at the moment. I got bacon hands. I'm going to go wash them. Alright, so first I'm going to head on over here. Let me do the fancy thing and set my iPad up here and pray it doesn't fall down to the abyss behind the oven. Stock pot. Double. It's on both eyes, evenly balanced between the eyes, so I can get the heat evenly distributed. I just got this on right now because I'm just going to toss all that bacon in and get that rendered and cooked down. Render is the fancy culinary word for cooking down animal fat, so it goes from a solid state to a liquid state, which is what I'm about to do. Because I'm going to be draining off large portions of the bacon fat, but I'm going to be keeping a good portion within the pot just for a cooking process, so I can get that nice rich bacony flavor into my soup. Set that aside for a second. It's all in clumps right now, but in a second, when it heats up within 30 seconds, I'll be able to separate these pieces. And here. And after I get all the pieces separated from each other, I'm going to reduce the heat and let it just keep cooking off. But I also need to, I'm going to let it stay still for for moments so it can crisp up. But it's important that you occasionally rotate your bacon in the pot. That way it doesn't burn on one side while the other side is raw. If you excuse me, I'm going to go down low and check my oven. I got some bacon almost done for the meat. No, yeah, it's about halfway rendered. Keto diet, you lose all the fun things like bread and potato and rice, but you get to keep other fun things like bacon. Quite honestly, if it was not for bacon being included in this diet, I don't know how doable this would have been. I'm putting my bacon that was crisped up on one side, but a little naked looking on the other. I'm going to check out my first batch of asparagus I got going down here. More time. My asparagus still has a decent amount of crunch. And the garlic's nowhere near there. Okay, let's take a peek inside this pot. The bacon is separated from each other, and I'm letting it cook for a little bit on the even surface. I'm going to reduce my heat down here a little bit. Make sure if you got two eyes, you reduce the heat evenly, otherwise you'll get uneven cooking. And we're going to let that bacon rend. Bacon rending is going to take 10 to 15 minutes. That's honestly one of the longest portions of this cooking process. But after that, it will go by pretty fast. And then, so after the bacon is rendered, I'm also going to be periodically draining off excess bacon grease. I would save it, but thick cut bacon generates a lot of grease typically, and I don't need to have that much grease on hand in my life, so this will be going in the trash for the most part. I'll try and use it in some of it in other recipes, but yeah, I just don't need that much bacon grease in my life. I used to cook a lot more with it. I used to weigh a good many pounds heartier. Okay. I'm going to pause at the same time, and then I'll check back with you guys when I have some more shelf bacon. Oh yeah, no, my bacon is about a third of the way through at the moment. If you see, some of it's starting to curl up a significant amount. It's starting to look like ham on a ham and pineapple pizza. So I'm going to go ahead and drain off some of this excess fat. And that will help me crisp up my bacon a little bit faster. I return. I've drained off maybe a half cup of bacon fat. Now I'm just going to let that leave there for about another minute and keep rendering. Basically, I'm aiming to get it where it's almost on the way to being bacon bits, and then that way I'll retain bacon fat for cooking out the rest of the recipe, and then at the very end I will toss in fully cooked crisp bacon back into the fan was on. If you missed it, my bacon was about a third of the way there. It's starting to look like ham. I drained off a good amount of that bacon fat. That way, the bacon's no longer seeing its own grease, and I can let it crisp up faster. Anyways, I'm trying to get to the point where the bacon is almost cooked all the way, like bacon bits, but maybe not quite that dark. That way I'm going to add it back into the soup at the very end. That way it retains its crispiness as much as possible. If I retain the bacon bits throughout the whole process, it's still going to be good bacon, it just will be soft and soggy by the time you eat your soup. Okay. You can probably hear the sill in the background. Let me turn off that fan, because I'm pretty sure my iPad picks up all sorts of audios. And then the next thing going in will be my Italian sausage. Then that'll be followed up by my pearl cauliflower and onions. And then I'll be adding in the liquid components of my soup. Okie dokie. My bacon is almost done. It's about at the 2/3 of the way point, so I'm going to go ahead and drain off more of this bacon fat and let it crisp out the rest of the way. Hold on. I'm going to crank this heat up and try and get this crispy. Because I'm trying to get this done the next 40 minutes so I can go pick up my girlfriend. Sausage over there ready. And then I would recommend anytime you are sauteing ground meats, get out your potato masher. This helps you break up the large clumps of the meat, because using a conventional spatula is a little bit harder to get even distribution of the ground meat. And if you don't do that, then you'll just have big clumps of ground meat, pork, beef, chicken, or turkey just sitting around in your soup or your chili. Some people prefer that. Most people prefer uniformity of whatever they consume, and big clumps of ground beef will catch them. That's the thing about thick cut bacon. It takes a long time to fully render. I'm going to show you the contents of this pot. See, the vast majority of this bacon is done now. I'm going to go ahead and get a slotted spoon and get that into a bowl. And then I'm going to get my sausage going and all that, about half of that bacon fat. If I have too much of the bacon fat liquid in there, it doesn't really brown up at all. It's just going to steam more or less. It'll still get cooked, but it won't have the texture I'm aiming for. It's always better to have a little crispiness to your ground beef, because since I'm making the soup, this is the only opportunity I'll ever have to get browning into whatever I'm making. And then you might have seen that video, but not all of those pieces were fully crisped up. That's because those pieces had higher chunks of fat in it. When they are allowed to cool and let some of the hot grease soak out, you'll find that nearly all of it is nice and crispy like it's supposed to be. Okay. Go ahead. I'm going to drain off half this fat in here, just so I have enough to thinly coat the pot. Reduce that heat a little bit because bacon fat's starting to smoke. And then go ahead and gently get your sausage in there. Break it up into small clumps right now. Try and spread it out across the pan. And I don't need to season this just yet. This is a pre-seasoned sausage mix. I will add some salt and pepper when I get it more distributed and I get a little bit of browning on it. It is always important to season your food throughout the cooking process so that the flavor builds in layers, as opposed to just adding tossing in all the salt, pepper, and herbs at the very end and not letting all the components develop flavor. Here's all the chunks of sausage. I'm going to let those stay as they are for about another minute or so. I'm going to flip them around, and then I'll get out my potato masher and start breaking it up into smaller clumps. Right now, I'm just trying to get browning onto my sausage. But I can go ahead and season it lightly with a little bit of salt and pepper. And next, I'm going to come in, after this is all cooked up most of the way, I'm going to come in with the onions and the cauliflower pearls. Now normally, those would have very different cook times. I have 1/4-inch diced onions. The onions are thin layered. They cook pretty fast, whereas cauliflower is much thicker, a lot more dense, and has a much longer cook time. But the diced or the riced or pearl cauliflower is much smaller than the onions, so they'll effectively have nearly the same cook time. So, if you look in here, you'll see there's a little bit of black developing on some pieces of these big chunks. So what I'm going to do now is, these are getting cooked most of the way. I'm going to get my masher and mash this all into an even layer. And then let it sit and crisp up along the bottom of the pan for a little bit. That way every little piece of meat has a little bit of caramelization to it. Basically, I'm increasing the surface area of the meat. That way it gets maximum browning as possible. Because in reality, I'm probably only going to fill this whole double soup pot about halfway when all is said and done. But I cannot get browning or crispness on meat or protein if they're all tight together. I'm going to go over that one more time. For the most part, these are pretty even sizes of ground beef or ground pork. I would recommend doing this for any time you got chili, hamburger helper, ground turkey, turning into taco meat, whatever ground meat you have. Cook it and break it up into as small pieces as possible so it can all have an opportunity to be browned and develop more flavor. About 30 more seconds. I'm going to try a piece, and then we'll go ahead and get my other veggies in there. I can taste the fennel. And now I'm going to add my veggies. Oh, some of them. Not the kale yet. Adding the kale now will turn into mush by the time all said and done. I will add my onion, cauliflower now. My garlic and herbs will come later because those cook really fast. chill unlidded for a second so they can get a little more caramelization. Then I'll be seasoning with salt, pepper, and red pepper. Right now, what I'm trying to get done is little bits of cauliflower. I don't need them to be mush because I want texture in my soup at the very end. But I just felt and heard a little bit of crunch in that. I'm not trying to get it so my teeth don't really have to do much work. But also, I have to keep in mind, you're going to be bringing a lot of liquid to boil and to simmer. So that'll work into your cook time as well. So I'm checking an onion. Lots of crunch, nearly raw. So it has to be going. But I can season that right now. So again, salt, some red pepper flake, and keep in mind, I'm putting beef base or beef broth in this. So keep that in mind when you're adding your sodium levels. Or get very low sodium beef broth. Or you can actually salt as minimally as possible, and then salt at the very end after you defrost it out. And if you find that you've made it too salty, you always have multiple solutions because this dish is getting heavy cream and cream cheese. So you can increase the amount in that to reduce the saltiness. But it also gets a little bit of Parmesan cheese at the end as well. So it would be important to keep that in mind in terms of the saltiness. So if you're curious as to the amounts I've used for the recipe, 1 pound of diced bacon. I have removed about 3/4 of the cooked off bacon fat total. 1 pound of Italian sausage mix. 1 pound package of diced cauliflower. 1 medium-sized yellow onion, and then I said about 3 cloves of garlic. It's going to be whatever comes out of this jar. It's about 3 cloves. Well, maybe almost 4. That is fine, because garlic is very welcome in this household. I added that because the onions are about halfway cooked. The cauliflower is getting there as well. And then I'm going to add in my thyme and my rosemary. I'm going to just go grab that. Rinse that bowl out. Now, this is where things become up to your discretion, because the kale can come in at any point, really. Just how done do you want your kale to be? I'm going to add in my kale now into this sauteed mixture, so it can develop a little bit of the residual flavors from the pork, the sausage, the bacon, the onion, the garlic, and the herbs. And kale is a fairly hardy leafy green, so it will still hold up by the time all my greens are done. I mean, by the time all the liquid component is done. Okay, so that is sausage, bacon fat, salt, pepper, red pepper flake, garlic, onion, and diced cauliflower. That kale was just added in. That's about 1 bunch. And it looks pretty voluminous right now, but that's going to reduce down significantly within the next minute or two. But the very center of those kale leaves will still have a lot of bite in their stem. And that's okay. We're going to aim for that to be cooked up. Alright, so now I'm actually going to add a little bit of that cooking wine I had from earlier. Wine makes most flavors better. You don't have to do this. But the wine, this cooking wine will also help evaporate any excess moisture in my sauté mix. So I'm only adding in maybe a quarter of a cup. And I'm going to let that cook out. And then I will add my broth and my dairy products in a sequence. Thing for a moment. This is about a 12-ounce glass. That's about 1.5 tablespoons of beef base. I'm going to add hot water to that. I'm going to let that run for a second. Some nice, salty, beefy Pepsi. It's going to go all in there. I have a little bit of residual base left. And add just enough water to get that all submerged. And then I'm just going to add some plain water as well, because that 12 ounces to that 1.5 tablespoons of base will be a pretty salty broth. So I have doubled the amount of liquid, essentially. And now I'm going to let that come to a boil. But there's not that much liquid in there. I have to add a fair amount of heavy cream and probably more water as well. But first, boil. So I'm going to get that lidded. The sun is peeking through intensely right now. And now we're just going to wait for a second. Hello. Hold on. Whilst you were gone, whilst I was gone, I added another cup of liquid, just plain water, to add more volume to the soup. And now it's come to a boil. I'm going to add about 2 cups of heavy cream. Let that pick it up. 2 cups of heavy cream is about all that's left in here. Actually, I'm probably going to need another cup. There's that. that's not doing too much at the moment. I'm about to cover that. That was about, so I've added about 4 cups of broth and 3 cups of heavy cream. And then I'm going to let that come to a boil, and I will assess from there as to whether or not I need to add the cream cheese. But I probably will for this recipe. Because, again, this is a keto-friendly version, so I have no room in this as a thickening agent. Cooking down heavy cream over time will thicken it, but not to the desired consistency I want. So I'll probably just need to cheat with some cream cheese to get it to where I want it to be. So I'll be back. Hello again. So this is where we're at. It's starting to thicken up a little bit. You can see the viscosity is slightly increasing, but it fails the back of the spoon test pretty hard. So this is going to get some cheese now. This is about a ½ pound of low-fat cream cheese. And about ½ a cup to 1 cup of Parmesan. And then you're just going to go ahead and get that all incorporated. The cream cheese block could have been cut up into smaller pieces so it breaks up more quickly. But that's fine. This liquid is pretty hot. And I will get it thickened up pretty fast. This would also be a good time to add that reserved bacon earlier. See there? All nice and crispy. Still pretty drippy. It's starting to solidify. Or not solidify, tighten up. You don't want this to solidify. That's bad. Let me show you what I am seeing at the moment. Still a little runny. So really it's just a matter of patience, something to cook down. So I'm gonna pause again and I'll tell you how much time has passed and let you know how long it has taken me to get this to the desired consistency. Alright y'all, I'm back for about 5 minutes and I've added the remainder of that Parmesan cheese, so it's been about a ½ pound of cheese total. And voila. And now I'm going to get that into its appropriate container. But first, a sample portion, just so you see what the final product looks like. It's nice and hearty. Well, yeah. Well, I will show you my next recipe within the next week or two. I think it's going to be a tuna casserole with edamame noodles. All right, bye.